Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into, well, a really fascinating political situation today. It's drawn from our sources on the recent Dutch parliamentary election. Our mission is to try and understand this political paradox in the Netherlands. What actually happens when the party looking most likely to win the most seats might just be fundamentally unable to govern?
Yeah, it's a pretty spectacular case study, isn't it? It shows how coalition politics can really um, put the brakes on populist momentum even after an election win. We're looking at the numbers for the 150-seat parliament, and honestly, the race was just incredibly close. Analysts are basically saying it was too tight to call.
Too tight to call, wow.
Yeah, and adding to that, you had nearly half the electorate, think about that, almost half, still undecided practically as they were walking into the polling stations.
Okay, so that's the backdrop, but here's the real hook, the core tension, right? It centers around Geert Wilders and his far-right Freedom Party, the PVV. They actually finished first in the previous election, 2023, and the projections suggested they could well win the most seats again this time.
But, and this is the big but.
Exactly. Here's the kicker. All the major mainstream parties, from the center-left-right across to the center-right, they publicly said before the vote, no, we will not form a coalition with Wilders. Didn't matter if he won.
Which immediately sets up this political dead end, almost. Winning votes doesn't automatically translate to holding power in this kind of system.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack the political landscape a bit. Why did the other parties feel they could just shut him out like that? Because the PVV's lead, even though they won before, it had actually shrunk quite a bit leading up to this vote.
Yeah, it faded fast. Our sources were projecting them somewhere in the range of, say, 24 to 28 seats.
Which is still significant, obviously, but...
Oh, absolutely. It's a big block.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a drop from the 37 seats they got back in 2023. And crucially, it meant the other parties were, right on their heels.
Okay, so the lead wasn't insurmountable.
Not at all. And if you look at what was actually driving the campaign, what voters were focused on, it really came down to three big things, three very tangible areas.
Not just ideology, then.
Less about pure ideology, more about practical concerns. Migration was definitely a huge topic, naturally. But also, the rising cost of healthcare was a major factor. And, maybe most critically, the really severe housing crisis in the Netherlands.
Ah, the housing crisis.
Yeah, those kind of kitchen table issues, they really determined where those crucial moderate votes went.
And it seems those votes spread out quite a bit, making it a real scramble among the other parties.
Exactly, a scramble for second place, effectively, and the gap was incredibly narrow. You had, on the center-left, this alliance of the Green Left and Labour Party GLP-PvdA, Frans Timmermans leading them.
Right, a well-known figure.
Very. And they were projected right behind the PVV, maybe 22 to 26 seats. His whole campaign message was basically, stop a right-wing government from forming.
Okay, so a clear anti-PVV stance.
Absolutely. But then you had a bit of a surge, maybe unexpectedly, from the liberal progressive D66 party.
D66, right.
Yeah.
Under Rob Jetten.
Yeah, and they ran what our sources called a resolutely optimistic high-energy campaign, quite different in tone. And the projections showed them potentially increasing their seats almost 5 times over, landing somewhere between 21 and 25 seats.
Wow, 5 times. That's a huge jump.
It really is. It suggests maybe voters were responding to that optimism, possibly as a reaction against, the instability and the more pessimistic tone from others.
Interesting. And what about the traditional center, the Christian Democrats?
The CDA, yeah. They were also expected to do better, potentially doubling their seats to land between 18 and 22.
Yeah.
Their leader, Henri Bontebal, kind of summed up the establishment view, saying he believed most Dutch people really just want moderate policies from the political center.
So if you add all those up, the PVV might have the most seats for one party, but they're still way short of a majority, less than a quarter of the total seats, maybe?
Exactly. And the center ground, if you combine the center-left, the liberals, the Christian Democrats, collectively, they hold a much larger share of the vote and the seats.
That really is the key point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it highlights how the Dutch system, this proportional representation system, doesn't just allow for fragmentation, it almost requires it. Coalition is baked in.
We really should dig into the system itself for a moment, because that seems to be the absolute root of all this complexity. Proportional representation, okay, but the level of fragmentation sounds extreme.
Oh, it is. Think about this. 27 different parties contested this election. 27.
27 parties on the ballot.
Yep, and potentially up to 16 of those could actually win seats and enter parliament.
16 parties in parliament. How is that even possible? What's the barrier to entry?
That's the thing. The threshold is incredibly low. You only need 0.67%, less than 2/3 of 1% of the national vote to win one seat, one MP.
Wow. Okay, let's just pause on that. 0.67% gets you a voice in parliament. When you have that kind of political splintering, it makes perfect sense that no single party is ever going to get anywhere near a majority, which is 76 seats.
Never. Which is why the Netherlands has been governed by coalitions for, well, over a century now. It's the norm. And typically, these aren't just two-party coalitions. Often, you're looking at four distinct parties needing to agree to form a government. That's what we saw in the last three governments.
4 parties. Just imagine trying to get 4 different groups with their own priorities and voters to agree on a detailed plan for government, let alone pass a simple budget.
It demands constant negotiation and compromise. And sometimes, inevitably, that high need for consensus leads to instability. We saw that very clearly with the government that just collapsed.
Right, the outgoing one. It fell apart really quickly, didn't it?
Less than a year after it took office. And the irony is it was actually Wilders himself who pulled the plug, as the sources put it.
Wait, Wilders was part of the coalition that collapsed. I thought they refused to work with him.
Good point. He wasn't formally in the cabinet, but his PVV provided crucial outside support to make the numbers work for that specific coalition. Yeah. VVD, BBV, NSC. He was instrumental in letting it form, but then he triggered its collapse when his own partners, the parties actually in the government, refused to back his really quite radical anti-refugee proposals.
I see. So he supported it, then sank it.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Because those partners felt his plans were either completely unworkable on a practical level or potentially even illegal under international law. So you had a government basically tearing itself apart over its own internal contradictions in under 12 months.
And there were consequences for that instability at the polls.
Absolutely. Big consequences. Pretty much all the parties involved in that short-lived government were forecast to lose seats, some quite heavily. It seems the electorate really punished them for that chaos.
Which loops us right back to this central paradox, this governing dilemma. If the PVV, Wilders Party, comes out on top again with the most seats, but then gets systematically blocked from forming a government by all the moderate parties, Wilders made that very dramatic claim that democracy will be dead. That's a serious accusation to make about your own political system.
It's incredibly serious. But, opponents and political analysts immediately push back with a necessary context. They stress that while in a parliamentary democracy like the Netherlands, finishing first doesn't automatically grant you the right to govern. It's not a presidential system.
Right. It's about commanding a majority in the parliament itself.
Exactly. What matters is whether you can build a coalition, any coalition, that commands the support of a majority 76 seats or more in the parliament. Any group of parties that can get to that magic number of 76 and pass a confidence vote is, by definition, a democratic government. It's about majority rule, not just plurality rule.
And looking at the sheer variety of parties potentially involved just underscores how complex getting to that 76 really is. Our sources mention parties focused on, everything. Parties specifically for the over 50s, parties for youth issues, animal rights parties.
Yep, a party for a universal basic income, even one focused on sport.
A sport party. Okay. So when you realize that maybe, the animal party or the 50-plus party might hold a few crucial seats needed to form a majority, the negotiation process must be incredibly intricate.
Absolutely. It forces compromise right from the get-go. And the general feeling among analysts was that because this election came right after what was widely seen as the most extreme government in recent history.
The one Wilders supported and then helped collapse.
Precisely. The system itself would likely react with a kind of self-correction. The expectation was that the next government would probably be a broad-based coalition, likely led either by Timmermans' center-left alliance or perhaps a moderate configuration on the right, but specifically excluding the PVV extremes.
So a swing back towards the center, towards perceived stability.
That seems to be the collective desire, yeah. A move away from the recent chaos and back towards consensus building, even if it's difficult.
Okay, so the election happens. People vote at polling stations, including some quite unique ones, apparently, like a model village.
Yeah, Madurodam, the miniature city, and even the Anne Frank House have served as polling locations. Adds a bit of local color.
Definitely. So polls close, usually around 9 p.m., and then pretty quickly afterwards, a usually reliable exit poll gives the first picture. But that's just the start of the real political marathon, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That's just firing the starting pistol. The exit poll gives an indication, but forming the actual government, That's a whole different process.
So what happens next? How does it actually work?
Well, the critical first step is the appointment of someone called an informature.
An informature. Okay, what's their role?
You can think of the informature as a kind of neutral political matchmaker. Usually an experienced, respected figure, often a former politician from a party likely to be involved.
A matchmaker. I like that. So they don't have a dog in the fight. They just see who might work together.
Exactly. Their specific job is to test out various possible coalition combinations that could, realistically, command that 76-seat majority in Parliament. They hold talks with all the party leaders, sounding them out, seeing where there's enough common ground on policy, and crucially, enough personal trust to make a governing partnership viable. It's a very careful, sensitive process.
Okay, so the informature explores the options. And let's say they identify a potential grouping, maybe 4 parties that look like they could reach 76 seats and agree on a basic direction. What then?
Right, once a likely combination is found, then the really hard work begins. Those potential partners go into intensive negotiations. They have to hammer out a detailed governmental agreement, a blueprint for the next 4 years. This covers everything: policy details, budget priorities, ministerial posts, all the necessary compromises.
That sounds like...
It is. This isn't just a vague agreement. It's often a very thick document. And only once that massive task is done and the agreement is finalized, then the proposed coalition government has to face a confidence vote in the parliament. If they win that vote, then finally they can officially take office. And because of all this, the fragmentation, the need for detailed consensus, these coalition talks routinely take months, sometimes 6 months, even longer.
Months. Wow. So really, the main takeaway here seems to be that the Dutch system is this incredible, almost paradoxical example of governing through extreme fragmentation. Winning the most votes as a single party is important. Sure, it gives you maybe the first shot. But it's really just the starting line for the real political game. This complex, month-long negotiation aimed at building a stable majority. Consensus among several moderate groups ends up being more powerful than the single largest bloc.
I think that sums it up perfectly. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the absolute structural necessity of building these multi-party coalitions acts as a powerful constraint. It means that even when, say, a populist movement achieves significant electoral success, like the PVV did, their actual ability to enact really radical, unilateral change is fundamentally limited. They're constrained by the need to find consensus with other, often more moderate parties.
So the system itself forces moderation, in a way.
It forces compromise, certainly. And maybe this raises a broader question, something for you to think about, relevant for any democracy grappling with fragmentation. How do we really define political success? Is it purely about securing the largest number of seats for your party? Or perhaps is true success measured by the ability to actually bridge those political divides, build trust, and forge a workable, stable majority that can effectively govern? Something to chew on until our next deep dive.